More than 50 people are injured after a truck rammed a bus station in northern Tel Aviv. Forty Palestinians are dead and over 80 injured after an Israeli airstrike on Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. And explosions have been heard near the eastern part of Israel's border with Lebanon. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time, and you're now watching Q News. We begin today's bulletin with the latest escalating regional tensions. Israeli media had reported that several occupation soldiers were killed and more than 50 people injured, with 15 in critical condition after a truck rammed a bus station in Gilo, north of Tel Aviv. Israeli ambulance services said that the truck struck a bus stop at a major intersection in central Israel. The Israeli occupation forces have stated that the circumstances surrounding the incident are still under investigation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced a comprehensive investigation into an incident in Giliot in Tel Aviv. In his statements, Netanyahu said that his government are awaiting the results of the investigation into the incident and are determined to pursue those responsible for the attacks.
It repeatedly asked them to temporarily leave the combat zone, which is right next to Israel's border with Lebanon.
Israeli police have announced that the driver of the truck, which struck dozens of people in Giliot, Tel Aviv, was killed after being shot. Israeli ambulance services said it treated 35 wounded at site, including 6 in serious condition, 5 in moderate condition and 20 with a mild condition. Most of them were transferred to hospitals for further medical care. At least 40 Palestinians have been killed and over 80 injured following an Israeli airstrike on a residential building in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. Palestinian local media reported that Israel attacked a block of at least 5 homes overnight near the western roundabout in Beit Lahia. They also reported that the total number of deaths since the beginning of the occupation siege in northern Gaza has risen to about 1,000, with the health system rendered non-functional. series of Israeli airstrikes on Jabalia refugee camp has killed 20 Palestinians and left many others injured. Gaza-based health authorities reported that Israeli forces struck a residential complex near Al-Fakhura school in Jabalia refugee camp. Medics said the new strike damaged several houses in Jabalia, the largest of Gaza Strip's 8 historic refugee camps. This marks the 23rd consecutive day of Israeli ongoing siege in northern Gaza. 8 Palestinians have been killed and several others injured in an Israeli airstrike on a school housing displaced people in the Al-Shati refugee camp. Medical sources confirm the deaths. This marks the second time that the school has been targeted by Israeli occupation forces, with the previous attack occurring on the 19th of this month, which also resulted in numerous casualties. For more analysis, we now move to Hala Al-Hamalawi in our newsroom. Hala, to you.
Thank you very much, Riham, and for further analysis on the situation in Gaza after the latest Israeli airstrike on Beit Lahia. We are joined from Ramallah by the media officer at the Palestinian Red Crescent, Nibal Farsakh. Welcome to Q News.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Mrs. Nibal, can you describe the current humanitarian situation in Beit Lahia following the recent airstrikes? What are the most pressing needs of the affected population there?
The situation in Beit Lahia and other areas in north of Gaza remains beyond catastrophic, as more than 3 weeks for the ongoing military attack in north of Gaza. The area is still besieged with no aid is coming in. There's extreme shortages of essential supplies, including food, water, as well as even medical supplies. Civilians are still trapped in the area of Beit Lahia, where thousands of civilians are still trapped in their homes. There is ongoing attacks on civilians' homes. Complete neighborhoods have been razed to the ground, and unfortunately our staff are unable to reach many areas in north of Gaza because these areas are extremely dangerous and Israeli forces are targeting anyone who tried to move certain areas. Civilians are struggling to get food and water, and many families have run out of food because of the ongoing attacks. At the same time, there is no aid is allowed to get in. As for the healthcare situation, all hospitals in north of Gaza are almost non-operational. These 3 major hospitals have been attacked several times. They are besieged with the medical staff as well as the patients who are trapped at these hospitals are suffering because of the extreme shortages of medications, medical supplies, as well as the fuel needed for the power generators.
Yes, which makes me ask you also, how have the recent airstrikes impacted health services in Beit Lahia and the surrounding areas? What challenges is the Palestinian Red Crescent currently facing in providing care to the injured?
Such attack that happened in Beit Lahia, you're talking about dozens of casualties and critically injured individuals that were at the same time. So that means having all this number of dozens of injuries while the healthcare system is almost collapsing and the hospitals can barely provide life-saving services. That means dozens of people might even lose their life because they can't receive the right healthcare that they need, as hospitals can barely continue providing the basic medical services. The Palestinian Red Crescent is currently continue providing emergency medical services in north of Gaza. However, we are denied access to several areas, including Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun. We are still operational in Jabalia refugee camp and other neighborhoods in north of Gaza, but providing emergency medical services in north of Gaza means working under very horrific conditions where our teams feel that they might be targeted at any moment, and we are still receiving dozens of phone calls from families who are trapped in their homes in north of Gaza. And unfortunately, because these areas are considered as red zones, we can't even send our staff to reach these families and evacuate them to hospitals. Many are trapped under the rubble, and unfortunately, as I said, they can't even receive the emergency medical services because rescue teams and ambulances can't reach such areas as they will be targeted. And that means dozens of people are killed and their bodies are still in the streets or trapped under the rubble, while others are injured, bleed to death without receiving the emergency medical services that they need.
Now, given that the recent attacks violate international agreements, how can the international law hold those responsible accountable?
Unfortunately, this is not the first attack on civilians. We have seen civilians being targeted everywhere. For the past year, we have said repeatedly that there is no safe places for civilians in Gaza. They are being targeted everywhere in their homes, in areas that even was designated as a humanitarian zones. We have seen repeated attacks in these areas, as well as targeting civilians in hospitals and literally everywhere, even in schools and honor schools. And that means what happened and what is continued to happen is unacceptable. We continue to calling on the international community to take serious measures to protect civilians. Civilians and the humanitarians should be respected and protected under international humanitarian law. And unfortunately, the international community is not taking serious measures to protect civilians. Since the beginning of the war, more than 42,000 civilians have been killed and almost 100,000 have been injured. The majority of them are children and women. And yet this is still to happen every single day without any serious measures to protect civilians.
Given this disastrous situation that you are describing to us now, how are the human rights organizations responding to the recent massacres in Beit Lahia? Are there any specific actions being taken to document and address these violations?
The international organizations are doing their best in order to continue providing life-saving services in the Gaza Strip. However, we are facing huge obstacles in regards to that. Israel does not respect the international humanitarian law, keep targeting civilians and the humanitarians, and we need serious actions to be taken from the world leaders, from the countries and the international community. They should take serious measures to allow humanitarians to continue providing their life-saving services. Without a ceasefire, without a protection for the humanitarians and medical personnel, without a safe, sustained, unimpeded humanitarian aid access to all areas of Gaza, the situation will remain dire.
So what are the immediate and long-term plans of the Palestinian Red Crescent to assist the residents of Beit Lahia in the aftermath of the recent bombings?
The Palestine Red Crescent continue to operate in north of Gaza and to provide life-saving services, including emergency medical services and even health services. We managed recently to establish an advanced medical post in Gaza to provide medical services to the displaced families, as well as to establish a field hospital, which is going to be the first field hospital in Gaza Governorate, also to provide medical services. But the situation, as I said, remains catastrophic, as humanitarian aid is still to be blocked from entering the area of north of Gaza, as well as medical supplies. However, we are continue to providing our services for the affected communities. The Palestine Red Crescent was part of medical evacuations. We managed to evacuate patients from Kamal Adwan hospital repeatedly. And today also and tomorrow we have different evacuation missions to evacuate patients from north of Gaza to hospitals in Gaza City, and then later to evacuate them to south of Gaza in coordination by the WHO.
Well, that was a media officer at the Palestinian Red Crescent, Mrs. Nibal Farsakh. Thank you very much for your valuable insights. Thank you so much. Now we go back to you, Riham.
Thank you, Hela, for that interview. And now we move to the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Sirens and explosions have been heard near the eastern part of Israel's border with Lebanon overnight. Several small projectiles fired from Lebanon were seen over the Lebanese-Israeli border. From their side, Hezbollah stated that they launched an air attack with drones on the Yudifat Military Industries company located southeast of Acre. Explosions have been heard and smoke has been seen over Beirut as Israel continues its operations against Hezbollah. Local media reported heavy airstrikes launched last night by the Israeli occupation forces across various regions, including Al Jamous, Sifir, and Harat Hirak in the Dahya district of the Lebanese capital. The strikes resulted in the widespread destruction of buildings, infrastructure, and facilities. Six civilians have been killed in Lebanon as a result of 3 Israeli airstrikes targeting several areas in the Majayun in southern Lebanon. The national news agency also confirmed that an Israeli airstrike targeted the town of Al-Burj al-Shimali near Tyre, resulting in the death of 2 individuals and injuries to another. Israeli warplanes have launched a raid on Bafilia and struck Khiam with 2 missiles, one near a prison and the other targeting the Jalehia area. Israeli warplanes also raided the Matraba crossing at the northern border with Syria, killing 2 Syrian soldiers and wounding 5 others. The Lebanese people continue to flee through the border to Syria amid ongoing hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah. People are seen carrying their belongings and walking to Syria at the Al-Masna border, which separates the 2 countries. Three people were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a house in the town of Zawtar al-Sharqiyya in the Nabta district of Lebanon. Israel carried out an airstrike on the town of Dir Ammar, accompanied by heavy artillery shelling of the villages in the western sector, including Zibqin, Yatir, Tayr Harfa, and Al-Jibin and Yarun. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has stated that Iran is no longer able to use Hamas in Gaza Strip or Hezbollah in Lebanon against Israel. Gallant added that Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out any military operations in Gaza. He also mentioned that the senior leaders of Hezbollah and most of its missile capabilities have been completely eliminated. Lebanese authorities have announced that the death toll from Israeli attacks on Lebanon has climbed to over 2,600, with over 12,300 wounded since October 8th of last year. This came after the Ministry of Public Health announced that Israel launched an airstrike on a health center in Lebanon's southern town of Azruya, killing one nurse and injuring 5 others. And that brings the total number of losses in Lebanon's health and emergency sector to 164 deaths and more than 270 injuries. Israel has conducted targeted strikes on Iranian military sites, escalating tensions and prompting global reactions.
In a significant escalation in Middle East tensions, the Israeli occupation army conducted targeted strikes on Iranian military sites early on Saturday, October 26th. Israel announced that it had completed precise strikes on military targets in Iran, framing the operation as retaliation for recent attacks allegedly launched from Iran. These strikes followed an Iranian missile barrage on October 1st, in which approximately 200 missiles reportedly targeted Israeli positions, resulting in at least 1 fatality in the West Bank. Israeli officials characterized the missile barrage as a severe provocation, asserting that Iran had crossed a critical line. An Israeli military spokesperson warned that if the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, Israel will be obligated to respond. In Tehran, multiple explosions were reported in the early hours, with state media showcasing the city's air defense systems intercepting incoming projectiles. Iranian sources indicated that military bases in western Tehran had been attacked, although initial reports did not confirm significant damage or casualties. International reactions varied. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, speaking in Samoa, reiterated Israel's right to self-defense while urging Iran to refrain from retaliation. Meanwhile, reports indicated that the United States was informed of Israel's planned strike shortly before its execution, but emphasized that American forces were not involved. The attack elicited strong international reactions as numerous countries condemned Israel's military actions against Iran. This recent exchange highlights the fragile nature of Israel-Iran relations, with both sides poised for potential further escalation in an already volatile region.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has claimed that the United States was involved in an overnight Israeli attack on the country. Araghchi claimed that the U.S. had provided an air corridor and equipment to the Israeli Air Force for the Friday night attacks on the Iranian military targets, which Iran officials say caused limited damage. On its part, the United States, which had pressed Israel to avoid targeting sensitive Iranian energy and nuclear sites, joined other countries in calling for a halt to the cycle of confrontations between Israel and Iran. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. More than 50 injured in a truck ramming a bus station in northern Tel Aviv. "40 Palestinians killed and over 80 injured in an Israeli airstrike in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza. And explosions have been heard near the eastern part of Israel's border with Lebanon. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. For real-time updates, connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. Thanks you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q.